Welcome to the Aliveness Habit, refreshing conversations with everyday masters of aliveness. And on this series, we talk about all things aliveness and the full rapture of what it means to feel alive, and how we feel alive, what things we do every day to make us feel more alive. And I have a brilliant guest with me today. I'm so excited to introduce you to David Jurasek. He is new a new friend of mine. David and I
Mm.
met only like, I don't know, a month ago. Not very long
Yeah,
ago.
a few weeks ago. Yeah.
Yeah, a few weeks ago, but just I'm just so happy to have you here because I know we're going to have a really cool conversation, and I'm always drawn to people who are alive and feel alive, and I know that there's lots of wisdom that we're gonna glean. And so I'll just do a short intro. You're a grateful husband and a proud father. I love how you start with that. And a daring therapist. I love it. A playful sensei. Did I say that right? Sensei,
Mhm. Yeah.
which I'm also excited to talk more about. A humble student and a patient community leader, a lover of nature and telling stories, and recently a man who sings with joy and heartbreak. Is that
Mm.
actual singing? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. It's been a new experience for me the last year and a half. Yeah.
amazing. Okay, well, we're going to talk about that for sure.
Okay. All
And then,
right.
and then like you're kind of like your raison d'être, which is just helping men, helping men to mend and tend to their relationships and
Hmm.
helping them at that breaking point and helping them to understand their landscape, their inner landscapes better, and helping them to navigate those waters. And so amazing work. And I'm just so thrilled to have you here. So thank you.
Oh, it's an honor. Thank you for having me. And you said masters of aliveness. I'm like, am I a master? I don't know.
I know everyone has the same reaction to that word. I'm like, come on now. We can all be masters. Can we be masters of our own destinies and our own realities and our
Yeah,
own experiences? Why not?
sure. Yeah, for
Uh,
sure.
I love it. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question that I ask all my guests, and it kicks us.
Mhm.
And the question is, what does the word aliveness mean to you, and how has that experience of aliveness evolved for you over time?
Ooh. Um, I will just say, like, I don't actually want to be a master because then it means that I've finished my journey and I'm more like love the journey itself, you know? It can mean lots of things, the mastery part, but aliveness. Ooh, I think I'm excited to hear what everyone else has said. Go back to your other episodes and listen. What comes up for me right now as we dive into this is this feeling of inspiration. Like I am an instrument, I'm a flute played by a something greater, you know? Like I'm receiving energy, vitality, wisdom, love,
Mm,
powerful energy that I can barely contain and hold. I can't hold. It just like needs to go through me or it'll like rip me apart or something, you know? I can try to keep it at bay, but if I let it go through me, I feel alive. You
mm,
know, I feel alive and on purpose, and I know why I'm here.
yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So like a throughness. A th
Yeah. I get it's so hard to find the right words, isn't it? It's like being of service, being on purpose, being inspired. I think inspired. You know, like the energy comes from within, but also from without, and it moves through my being.
Mm.
Yeah.
I think I know what you're talking about,
Hmm.
but like how does that happen? What is this throughness? Like what is that?
I think we'll have to unpack that for sure. Like how does that happen? I mean, takes me to your second question, right? Like how does that changed? I think in the past, I felt more like a beggar with an empty bowl wanting to be filled, like, and knowing certain experiences and certain people like to fill up others, right? And aliveness maybe felt like, oh, if I become a great filmmaker and I have lots of people who love my work, then my bowl will be full. I'll be recognized and known in the world, and that's aliveness for me. Um, or if I am like really skillful as a black belt and people admire my skill and I can do amazing things with my body, wow, that will feel amazing, right? Um, and this is kind of like that used to be the sort of the chase, the longing, the hunger for that, those moments of fullness. And it feels more to me now like that I'm here more to learn about how each of us fill each other up and fill ourselves up and let ourselves be filled. I know it might sound a little vague, but like
Mm.
I think it's a triple job, you know? I don't want to put all the pressure on other people to fill me up or my work to fill me up with aliveness and joy and purpose. But I, of course, pursue that in the world.
Mm.
And I also know I need to fill myself up. And I also know that there's only so much I can fill myself up, and there's only so much I can receive and from others, and there's only so much I can do for others. So there's some kind of divine energy, something greater that I can also tap into. And I think for some people, it's as simple as like nature. Went for a long walk this morning. I got filled up, like my whole body's tingling. I saw a blue heron, or, a gray heron. I mean, it was just like, it was stunning. I was like 10 feet away from it. I was just like, wow, the wonder, the awe, the beauty filled me up. And I think there's also other pathways, there's ways through prayer, through art, through singing, through lovemaking, through so many ways to allow that inspiration to come in.
Yeah. I love how you describe that. I do. And how do you know you're alive? What tells you? Like, what's the actual experience for you? How do you know that you're in that space of inspiration?
I used to run a theater company, and we'd be on stage, and everybody like the actors and the musicians, and I'd be the director and the actor sometimes. We would feel like you feel so much self-consciousness, oh my God, these people paid money. We got to perform. They want something from us. And do I look okay? Do I feel ready? And then you start responding to the audience. It was improv, right? So you're responding to the audience. And at first, there's this kind of self-consciousness, am I doing it right? Am I pleasing these people or meeting them in the ways that they want? And then at some point, that would melt away.
Mm.
It would just be, I'm in the joy, I'm in the play.
Mm.
And I lose a sense of my own self-consciousness. And yet I feel very connected to the other people in the room.
Mm.
And 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 when I worked with ensemble, it's like there's no star. So everyone's job is to be as fully present and inspired as possible to create the most interesting and compelling drama, right? And if we listened well to everyone else, then it becomes very meaningful, very moving, very
Mm.
relevant. And to me, that was an expression of like full aliveness. I'm alive with other people, bringing to life something that maybe somebody tells a story and it's inside their head, and now all of a sudden it's come alive in front of all of us, and we're crying and laughing together. And it could be as simple as you sitting at the dinner table and you're telling a funny story or a joke, or you're pointing out something to somebody and they are deeply moved,
Yeah.
by that insight that you have inside of them. I think that's, to me, those are expressions of aliveness.
Mm.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, I hear you. A few things come to mind when you're speaking, like
Hmm.
at the National Arts Center the other day, and I was listening to an orchestra,
Hmm.
and it just makes me think of the orchestra. Like the attunement in an orchestra is similar to what you're sharing, is like you have your own instrument and you have to play with your instrument, and then but then you also have to listen to the all the instruments around you, and you have to look at the conductor, and the conductor is, and it's like, wow, like how does all of that make such a beautiful coherent sound that flows so incredibly, and it like literally flows through me, like it just I was just sitting there going like, wow, like, and I felt so alive through that, through just that experience. And I had a moment where I had to stop and go like, what is happening? And I felt the chills, like I felt the vibration in my body. And it was just like I couldn't breathe big and deep enough, and it was just so magnificent, that sound and the coherence of the sound. And then I looked at the stage and I'm like, these are just, it's like these are instruments and they're all coming together and they're doing this and they're creating this. And it was just wild to me. So it just, when you speak, I'm like, that's the aliveness, right? It's this, it's that, it's flowing through and it's coming out. And you're not really, you're just in such
Yeah.
resonance. You're in such resonance in that moment. And you forget
Hmm.
about everything else. Like, I don't even remember what I was thinking about before. Like, there's a real flow state that you kind of connect with in that moment too.
Yeah. And for me, aliveness is always an authentic experience. It's not necessarily positive or negative. I know sometimes people want it to be positive, feels good, but I don't. I feel if I'm only allowing the positive range of my expression, then I'm not really alive. It's like half of me is closeted or hidden, right?
Yeah.
So it's allowing whatever needs to come through, and then there's a skillful craftiness too of like, how do I express this at this moment with these people if it's a delicate, hard, challenging thing that needs to be expressed? How do I do so in the service of growth and with compassion, but not censoring and um, diluting the energy that wants to come out?
Hmm. Yeah. I hear you there as well. I also appreciate the word skill, because I do feel like sometimes, the like to aliveness, I think does have an element of skillfulness to it, in terms of how we, first of all, how we relate to this, and
Hmm.
how do we express that out into the world, like you're sharing. Um,
Hmm.
and I do feel I sometimes when you say that, some people, oh my God, skill and this and that. It's like, but there is a level of, again, the mastery, if I could bring that word back in, but there's a
Sure.
little
Yeah.
mastery in how we share and how we express and how we communicate. And we have to learn that. I mean, would you agree with that, that's something learned that we
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm a big, it's funny I say that. Well, I said it takes skill. I think it more accurate would be to say it takes discernment and choice.
Mhm.
And even more so if someone comes to me and says, "Oh, okay, I want to be more alive, or I want to present to people, I want to, or it's very intimate, I want to be more present with my wife or
Mhm.
with my kids," that's usually what people come to me for. And then they come up with all these like, I've tried all these trainings, I've tried to do this, I've tried all these tactics, these strategies, these skills. And for me, it's a lot about unlearning. It's about removing the barriers to that for the natural organism to
Mhm.
express itself. So it's not so much about teaching people to communicate better or coaching them on tactics and little skills. I found over the years it's helping to figure out where the blocks are
Yeah.
for that energy that wants to go through, and then helping them to translate and transform those blocks into actually really powerful gateways. I think the greatest humor, the greatest excitement in a room is often around the thing that you most want to hide and not share. Right? It's like, here's me, I'm presenting the polished version, but the parts of me that are rough, that I'm embarrassed by, that's where people light up the most because they're like, oh, that's like me, or they relate to that, or there's a vulnerability, there's humanity, there's humility, there's so much juice there. um, that my tendency is to help people to go to those places
Mm.
where they're stuck and help them to have breakthroughs there, and then the energy flows more freely, more easily.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Was it possible to feel alive without being vulnerable?
I don't think so.
Mm.
I don't think so. Not like I don't think vulnerability needs to be this like I'm raw and wounded moments. It can also be, wow, I've never felt so much joy. I'm terrified of like feeling it fully. And here I am feeling it fully, and I'm laughing and crying at the same time because that's vulnerable for me, right? Or I know a lot of parents, for example, and vulnerability means, for one parent, vulnerability means being mad and showing their teeth to their family because they're too nice. Another parent is doing that all the time. So for them, the aliveness comes when they feel their grief or
Mhm.
their longing or their neediness.
Mhm.
Instead of barking at everybody, they have to speak up and say, I'm really feeling lonely and left out. It's easier to just yell at everybody and boss them around. But for me to so I think it's different for each person, right? And that's the beauty and the surprise in the encounter is you don't know what you're going to find.
Mm. Yeah. Yep, I agree. And that word vulnerability, I know you work with a lot of men, and I know that's this especially difficult experience to tap into, certainly for men. I know, I mean, I have a house full of men. I've got, my husband, and then I got my two boys, and I seem to have always boys in my house. So I'm definitely a boy's mama. And,
Yeah.
it's something that I can always see, where that sort of conditioning is, and
Mm,
I gotta show up and I have to know it all and I have to be the guy,
mm,
the good guy. And that's certainly, anyway, the type of guys that I hang out with, this sort of presentation and this projection of doing
yeah.
it the right way, and having the answers. And so I just
Mhm.
wonder, like, that word vulnerability is what's your like, why is it so hard for our boys to feel vulnerable and to be vulnerable?
Well, the quick story is I remember being in Montreal in a alternative school where 5-year-olds, they're most racially diverse, multilingual 5-year-olds I've ever met. They're even like open to sexuality differences. They're 5 years old. There are 30 of them. And we were telling stories. We're making up a story together. There was one rule: do not negate what other people say. So you add to the story and you keep adding. And if you don't like something that somebody else said, you just add something else, right? Everything was in the story. This was about this mouse who traveled between countries and was accepted for their differences. But when the boy mouse wanted to put on a girl's dress, the energy in the room was like the aliveness just left.
Mm.
The teacher wanted to stop. And half the kids, boys and girls, wanted to kill the protagonist in the story. These are cute 5-year-olds. They suddenly want to destroy the hero of their story because they crossed the line. You don't cross that line.
Mm.
And I think boys know that instinctively. They know that very early on. There's deep conditioning gender wise. You don't want to be vulnerable. Vulnerability is girly, is weak.
Mm.
You can have girlfriends and you can enjoy girls, but you don't want to be a girl. You're a boy. If you cross that line, we will cast you out.
Mm.
You will cease to be a male and you will be ostracized. You will die in the sort of primitive brain sense because you'll lose your tribe. You'll lose your identity and you'll lose your tribe. And very intimately, it's this fear that your father figure, the male figures in your life, will reject you,
Mm.
and your brothers will want to have nothing to do with you, will humiliate you. So
Mm.
it's really deep,
Mm.
and I think we forget we have that in boys and girls have different, taboos and barriers inside. And it's really profound. I think it's been there for thousands of years. And so but at the same time, vulnerability can be an expression of profound courage and strength. But with boys, when I work with boys and men, I find that I have to start with the strength and then I can help them to see the vulnerability that's necessary for them to go where they want to go, for them to feel fully alive. Like, for example, when I work with boys and men in a martial arts context, right? They want to be strong, they want to be tough, they want to defend, protect, beautiful things. But when they actually study violence and movement, a lot of times you have to like boys will be sitting on each other. That's so gay, they'll say, right? They're so intimate. I feel so vulnerable. I'm having a panic attack because your crotch is right next to my face. Oh, gross. And they feel extremely vulnerable and exposed, and all of their, fears are right there. And they might start and burst into tears because they feel someone has trapped them and they can't move and they feel powerless and weak. Like all of this stuff comes up in the contact of just wrestling and being together and just learning patterns. And it's not actually dangerous physically because they're moving in a way that's not going to hurt them, but it's psychologically so confronting, right?
Mm.
And for me, I think that's a perfect arena for boys and men to study intimacy and vulnerability. So that can be like there's a strength and a courage to stay in that, breathe, to let the tears come, let it go through you. Yeah, it does feel powerless. So when you do this to somebody else, you know what it feels like for them. There's empathy building too, right?
Mhm.
So now that you felt the vulnerability, we celebrate your courage for going in there and daring to experience that. And we celebrate your compassion and empathy for others when you're training with them. You don't push them too hard. You back off.
Mm.
That's a manly virtue. That's a that's a strength that takes care of vulnerability, that protects vulnerability, that cherishes vulnerability. And when and boys have that relationship to vulnerability, they feel they can be whole because they can be vulnerable, but they can also be the protector,
Mm.
They can be the one who's strong, but they can also sometimes feel that weakness inside too, and that's okay. And that's what they're there for others, and that's what their brothers and their male figures are there for them to protect them. I mean, I put a lot out there in that sense, right? But that's the way that I approach it because if we just talk about it in the classical sense of vulnerabilities, you sit and you talk about your feelings of um, hard feelings that you have, that there's just a closed door, right? Most of the time, it's too hard. Yeah.
Yeah, and I really appreciate your what I'm getting or getting from your approach and from your perspective is this both and,
Hmm.
right? It's like not an either or. And I think I appreciate that for our boys because I do think that there's a sort of a built-in pre-programmed either or setting for our boys and your whole thing is like powerful and loving, right? Powerful and loving boys and men.
Hmm.
And so
Yeah.
this idea of strong and weak living in the same sentence and both and not carrying a big valence around whether that's good or bad or right or wrong or light or dark. It just they just can both coexist in harmony in the same sentence and in the same experience
Yeah.
of life. I think that's just like goes back to that idea that aliveness holds all of it all at once.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
there is no it's just a coexistence of all of it. I mean, and anyone listening might be like, okay, Alex, like that sounds very vague again. But I mean, and this is where I think that skillfulness, because to be able to do that, it's taken me a decade,
Mm-hmm.
a decade, and I'm not there. I'm not gonna ever be there, but there is a certain skillfulness that I think is connected to that allowing and letting be component
Right.
you're speaking,
Yeah.
which I think is embedded in that unlearning, right? Is that the skill comes in the unlearning. And there's a
Hmm.
skill, would you agree with that?
Yeah.
There's a set of skills that you need to unlearn and to be able to move through the move through life with a totally different vantage point. And that takes so much courage to do that, especially for our boys. Uh,
Hmm.
and so I just feel like, that is such a powerful message for aliveness, this both
Hmm.
and construct that um and it's not just for boys, I think it's for women as well, where we can have and enjoy all of it all at once
Hmm.
in
Hmm.
different contexts and different machinations, um, but that it can all move through us. Because how much of our time is spent turning away from the things that we don't like?
Hmm.
They're deeply unpleasant,
Hmm.
right? The pain, the shame, the fear, the whatever. We turn away.
Yeah.
We chase the pleasantness, right? We chase that which feels good, and then we think, well, that must be alive. That's what I want.
Yeah. Yeah. The way you just said, there's so much that you said, but the last thing, to me, that's a concept of addiction, right? And that's what, and I don't even think the term is really the best because I think it's just immature. It's like a child wants novelty, newness, aliveness, and that looks like no homework, lots of candy. Feel good, don't feel bad. Nothing hard, super easy. Instant gratification, right? But if you live like that into an adult body, that's called addiction,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're avoiding things that are hard and you're chasing things that are easy. You want to keep feeling in love with people, and as soon as that fades, you drop them and you go somewhere else. Like it's part of our culture. We live in a disposable culture. We don't know how to fix anything. We barely know how to make things anymore. We just consume and dispose. And so it's counterintuitive in a sense, or counter common sense, because the common sense is so disposable, right? But it is coming back to a deeper longing for deeper food that, like you said, it has the whole spectrum. It's not just the white sugar. It's got everything, and it's got sweetness, and it's got grit, and it's got spice, and it's got every flavor there. And I mean, that's where I get a lot of aliveness from hard feelings, grief, shame, guilt, fear, when we sit with them skillfully. And
Mm-hmm.
I would add to the skill, I would add container. When we have a container, a way of holding ourselves and being held, and we choose in that container to open up
Mm-hmm.
to that energy, it transforms into something really profound and beautiful. And new energy and new aliveness comes into our whole body that we were not able to access before. To me, there's nothing more beautiful than watching anybody expand their range of wholeness. You know, it's so beautiful. It's like the universe just got bigger inside of that person. And then they're more capable of being present with someone else because they don't have to shut down anything. They don't have to criticize anything. They're like, oh, your shame resonates with my shame. I respect you. I understand where you're coming from. When we're narrow and our range of aliveness is very small, we go around the world with these blinders and this very um, narrow way of seeing and receiving people. So it's a really beautiful thing, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm feeling you there. And what about you? What fills your cup? What is your um recipe for aliveness?
I think there's lots of things on my list, but the maybe the top one is seeing people and being seen by people.
Mm,
Because it's like there's a window into their soul.
mm,
And if they allow themselves to be seen, then it's like I enter into a whole universe that I can explore and discover, and vice versa.
mm,
And when people are curious about each other, when people make space and try to understand and marvel and wonder at each other, to me, there's nothing more expansive and amazing and satisfying.
mm,
It's also, for me, it's also the portal for love. If I don't feel seen, I can't feel loved.
mm,
So I try to see people and offer them that gift and hope that I can be seen sometimes. And in that, the love can enter, you know?
yeah.
Um, that feels like a quiet kind of aliveness, but it's quite profound and deep.
Yeah. Um, yes, I feel you there. And yet, uh I think love is the greatest expression that there can possibly be
Mm-hmm.
for any aliveness. I mean, isn't that kind of, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's a question, but for me, it's like when I feel really alive, in love with everything and everyone. I'm just like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't necessarily mean that I agree or, but I can be in resonance with everyone and everything, and I can see everybody, like you say, it's like my window of tolerance and of holding and of all of it has just expanded exponentially, and I can just hold so much more. And it's really why sometimes when big things are happening in the world, um, that require more holding and more aliveness and more expansion, I really double down on the things that create that within me so that I can hold
Mm-hmm.
it aside. I don't know if
Yeah,
that resonates with you as well, but like
absolutely.
with
Yeah.
like as a human being, knowing what that is for you is so important because there's a huge impact of that, right? Um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. I would just say maybe to the people who are listening that to me, I think there's many gateways to aliveness. But the one that's the deepest and the strongest, I think, is always the one that also resonates with our deepest wound.
mm,
I know growing up, that was the most painful thing was not feeling seen, feeling invisible, feeling invalidated,
mm,
gaslit, you know? Uh, and that could have just, that almost destroyed me, that feeling of wretchedness and invisibility, unworthiness.
mhm,
But I had the grace and the the luck that I had a lot of wonderful mentors and people who loved me up and who saw me and fed me that food that now I can give that gift that I was missing,
mhm.
And I think that everyone has that kind of in some way, like the thing they most crave and needed growing up is the thing they're here to give. And I think that's the portal for aliveness.
Beautiful. Wow, what a beautiful connection to make. I don't think that's a connection that most people make. So thank you for
Mhm.
because I think about me and I'm like, huh, I'm probably a little bit the same. And I
Mhm.
don't know if I always felt like seen either. And I definitely felt like unsure about a lot of parts of me. I felt sure about some parts, but there was a lot
Hmm.
of other parts that, I wasn't sure about. And I lived in a lot of doubt a lot of the time, but I
Hmm.
projected something very different on the outside, right?
Hmm.
And so all of that inside of me just kind of just lived there and languished a little bit. And
Hmm.
and so, and so now it's like the greatest thing I could do is give that gift to other people, right? The same as you of being seen,
Hmm.
heard, and of
Yeah.
being of pulling that doubt out and pulling all of that out and going like, hey, so I really appreciate um that connection because it's
Mm.
true. It's so true. Um, yeah, beautiful. I think we're probably coming up to
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Um, it's so cool. I love chatting with you. What is something that you would like to leave our listeners with today about the experience of aliveness?
Mm. Well, just give me a moment. It's a good question. I think it would be something around like, everybody has their own gateways to aliveness. Some people it's through touch. Some people it's through humor or play or um it'd be to notice if you're listening to this, to notice your own way towards it that nourishes you and feeds you. And is there a way where you can share that with somebody?
Mm,
Because I think it doubles and triples and amplifies, whatever it is, whatever that gateway is, when you share it with somebody else, it just gets wider and easier to go through, and the flow is even stronger, I find. And we live in such an individualistic society at the moment, right? Everyone's so afraid of each other
mhm,
that to even find one person that you can share your aliveness with, who's receptive and open, is such a gift, such a
mhm.
beautiful mutual experience. Um, that would be my encouragement. Yeah.
I love that. And also, it doesn't have to be somebody that you know well. Sometimes sharing your aliveness with a stranger on the street or, somebody that you don't even know. If you don't have someone in your life that you feel really safe with, then
Mm.
option to just sometimes, I don't know, buy a plant for somebody on, a stranger. I've done that before and I just give them a plant or a little flower and it just changes. It
Mm.
That's an expression of aliveness.
Mhm.
And so I really love that um and just being able to share with anyone, someone you know.
Yeah. 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 It can be as simple as walking down the street and smiling at somebody. And they are a little bit uncomfortable at first, but then they smile back, or they don't even smile back, but they take it in and it makes their moment a little brighter. Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, wow. Thank you so much for all your beautiful sharing here today. I so
Thank you
appreciate
for having me. Yeah, this is wonderful.
Yeah, thank you.